or thereabouts. So I think you will have seen by now that Mirko appears 3 times in the schedule. So we have the short preview, going back to the film poster. Now we have the second act, and then the paper after we will have him again in the final kind of finale. So 20 minutes and 10 minutes for questions, and I'll show you 5 minutes before the 20.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can we do a plug for your session after this?
Excuse me?
Can we do a plug for your final act?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to plug his final act because we've been having murmurings about actually hacking and making like stop yammering, start hammering. And that's actually going to be the final act in this room. So in 30 minutes, stick around and we'll actually make some cool stuff with the programmers and journalists and everyone in between.
Now, I have to apologize for showing up 3 times. I kind of hacked the conference because I had proposed such a workshop back in like 2 months ago, and it kind of got, forgotten. And I reactivated a week ago, and the idea is that, we're there actually exchanging how we could actually do that. Because it's always a journalism perspective, and I would like to hear what the developers say, because developers in my world are scarcity. They are always not gettable, okay? So I'm going to speed it up. It's late in the afternoon. Everybody has heard quite a bit, and my talk will be on SlideShare once I check the picture rights, like it should be tonight. So it will be findable, and I kind of tweeted on OKCon hashtag and DTJ hashtag, which is a normal hashtag where we kind of communicate. And looking here, I see quite a few familiar faces by now. I'm doing this for 2 years, and this is kind of, for me, this is like my journalism family by now. I really like to be in this space, and I think it's really important. And it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work. It's for me the same as for Simon. I'm kind of, doing quite a bit of stuff on the weekends and on the side. Otherwise, it's not possible to do this here. So a quick one. The amazing thing is that I'm going to try to come up with some additional stuff that is not, overlaying. I walked away from the 10 points list this morning, so I'm lucky here. I have like just only 5. So these are the 3 things that I want to talk about. What is the situation now? What would be the challenges ahead that me, from a journalist perspective, would like to point at? And then third, will there be a pattern change? There's something going on here, open data on the highest levels. Can we actually, make that working for the benefit of all of us? On some perspectives like having work, being paid for it, which are aspects of that, and doing a good service to the general public. It's not all sorted out right now. So let's start. First of all, open data is a winner. First, it's probably driven by the awareness that today we all need the data. There are no saber-toothed tigers out there anymore, but they're credit sharks. And these credit sharks are probably hidden in the data. There are important decisions that we make in our lives today, and we usually don't have the data to really judge what's coming out of it. We want that house, so we're talking to the bank, and when they say, well, we can do the interest rate like this or that, we don't have a clue. If we would look at the data, we would probably know. We would still have to pay for the house, but there would be less of a rip-off in there. So it's interesting, and I think it's quite notable that this idea of open data is by now accepted on the highest levels of politics. In the US, while the data.gov is under some pressure, it's still an acceptance to work with it. It's difficult to finance that and how to do it, and there are woes right now, but the idea is through. And that's amazing. I mean, incredible. And the kudos for that go to the people from the open data movement. When was the last time that the powerful in the world gave away so much power without violence? But what's next? Open data is effectively a small movement of people devoted to their work. So what are we going to do now? Are we helping repairing the systems above? And by time becoming part of these systems? That will happen. We will look at Eurostat, at the big statistical collections and all that, and it's important. But my suggestion at the point why I think media plays a role in this, the people should benefit from that. And media could be like a bracket, like a conveyor belt, moving around the insights that we find in the data so that you, me, everybody has a benefit from that. Like not in 10 years, now. Financing a house, getting a car, whatever. There's so many problems. Data, open data, closed data, hidden data, whatever. There's much more. We're just scratching the tip of the iceberg here. So, leading to the next point, data-driven journalism, why bother? I would see 3 challenges right now. And this is applicable to all of us, and as a community of journalists, of hackers, of people in between, we could probably solve some of them. The first one is there's a lot of dirty data. Second one is data needs story. I mean, that's kind of obvious, but what is the story? Can we see an example so that everybody's on the same envelope? And then creating a new camera, that was a short quip from David McCandless at another event last week in Brussels, where he said, we need to create a new camera on the world, and that's fitting into the same general topic. It's the first time that we look at large data sets. You have been working with data stored on mobile phones. First time that we look at it, published it, got 2 high winning prizes in Germany. New camera. These are actually, it's a photo of the oil sands in Alberta, which is one of the biggest reservoirs of oil, but it so far was hard to dig for it. And I like to have this example because with data it's a little bit like that. We are now able to dig into the data, but it's not a thing going into one direction. We will see a lot of problems coming up that we haven't even thought of so far. So why is data dirty? There are a lot of reasons for that. Intentionally forged, I would say there is something in it, but I can't quantify it at this very moment where people are actually forging data. Bigger problems are that it's in the wrong format, like PDF. It's incomplete. It is collected with a wrong focus because somebody has thought of a statistical basket, and whether that basket is actually telling us the truth or not, hard to judge. In Germany, unemployment is defined by a certain measure, highly debatable whether it gives us a clear picture of how many people don't have a job. And I think we find any examples of that all over the world. So it goes on like that. So this ecosystem needs to be cleaned up. And thanks to open data, we can now look at it, but it will only be in the next years that we see the flaws in that data more clearly. Then the next thing is, and it's a question by Jeff Jarvis that is kind of bugging us for the last 3 years. He's saying, journalists, where do you add value? Who needs journalists? What for? What is the news story that you're telling me instead of just copying Google News or other way around, whatever? And I think there's an answer to that in data journalism. And I used this chart last year, actually. But I think it's still valid. Data, we need to filter it. We need to visualize it. And then on top of it, we have to tell a 2-minute story why it's important. And that's what journalists, if they are good journalists, are good at, creating impact. And that's the role of journalists. And so this whole discussion, I'm watching it quite closely, whether journalists should become programmers or programmers journalists. I think it won't be that mechanistic like it is. My idea is that everybody should do what he's best at. And a lot of journalists, quite a few examples, are able to program, not everybody, but this whole thing about math skills and art school types, I don't think it's so relevant. And I'm going quick through that, but I think it's a prime example of what we can do, and that's why I love it. It's from David McCandless. And you know that $1 billion where he said, I don't understand all these billions. And I'm always taking one thing out of that, and that's a new camera. That's the cost of the Iraq War versus the depth of Africa in a relation. And that's, digging out stuff like that, that's the story. That changes everybody's view. So it can go even further, and there's a journalist, and I actually wrote an email to Simon and that journalist and tried to connect them. The name is Brian Storm. Brian Storm is doing multimedia journalism from New York. He has high journalistic ethos. And we're wondering how somebody's financing himself and then doing that stuff. If you haven't had a chance to look at MediaStorm, please go watch it. And there's just one story. It's called Never Coming Home. It starts with data dots. And then all of a sudden the data dots stop. And they go to the parents of that data dot. It's the casualties of American soldiers in the Iraq War. And I think it's a marvelous piece. It's like 12 minutes, but it changes your views. And that story, that's different. That's really hitting you. That's nothing you can ignore anymore. So if that's also great, what's keeping us? What are the barriers for data journalism? And I said a little bit of that. We have to rebuild the newsrooms, and there's quite a bit of reshuffling in there, and it's not easy. And I give you a short run. Today's media, and it's interesting, I haven't seen the results from the DDJ survey so far, they were new to me, but it's interesting that newspapers are kind of shying away from data journalism to some part. And I think it's a faulty problem of how they see their models. They still see digital as an addendum, something like an afterthought. And they kind of missed out on blogs, that's why I put it in red, like they didn't get it so quickly. But on the other side, now they're building iPad and mobile applications, so there's a lot of investment going on while the newsrooms, the staff is reduced. So it's a problem of the model. And I would like to show you one example how that can be changed based on a data mined. This is one local newspaper story from a newspaper where somebody I trained came from. He actually wrote that story. Stories about traffic are going well with them. But they write single stories in the CMS. There's no other way to do that right now. And here's another example from a fast mover, which is the LA Times. They by now have a homicide map. So they collect all stories that go in there, and then they draw the stories from there. That's a different approach, and I show you how that changes. It's a database with the crime data, and so the journalists have a chance to argue from rich statistics that they made their own. And I would argue, whether a mass type or not, if you look at your statistics that you did, you are kind of able to see the patterns in that, whether you're really a statistic guru or not. And that's the point. Interacting with the data makes you more knowledgeable, and it puts you in a position to tell better stories. So it's not that difficult, and I kind of wonder why it's so hard to get. I hope it's kind of conceivable here what I mean with it. So there might be a reason for that. What is the situation of journalists? And that's what I'm bringing back from the seminars that I'm giving. The models are failing. No access to server. We're not allowed to do that. And that was about using big picture format. You know that big picture format from Boston.com? I was showing it to them. I said, the trick here is that they use a full screen and make it more emotional. We're not allowed to do that in our newsroom. We would get thrown out. What, for making the picture bigger? Could happen. And then I'm like, why are we talking about multimedia journalism here? So that's why I'm saying Simon Rogers is an outlier. I repeat it. The normal situation for journalists all over Europe, and it's not exclusively to Germany, is that they're not allowed to do that much as they would like to do. And the funny thing here is that while we have layoffs in the newsroom, like the people from the seminars telling me, in our local newsroom we were 15 5 years ago, now we're 3, but we're working more, and we're supposed to do online on the site somehow. Have you done something for online besides for the print edition? So they have almost unbearable work conditions, expected to do more, and then we are wondering why the journalism is not as good as we want it to be. So it's funny, because on the other side, alone in Germany, there is a skill gap of 20,000 people looked for by online media by now, or online, the whole online ecosphere. And I think we should make sure that we move people over, that we get connections from academia, the skills moved into positions that are paid for, where we're not doing it for free, because it's valuable what we're doing there. And there's a hint at a McKinsey study that was on flowing data in the US. They expect 900,000 people that they need for data analytics, and 1.5 million managers who are data savvy in the next 5 years. So there's something coming. Data is probably the answer, and the bigger world believes it. So what are we doing about developing this field? You saw the survey. I kind of bugged the EGC. I said, we have to do a survey. We know nothing about the training needs. And thankfully, Liliana responded, and so we have some data. I'm pretty amazed by what's coming out of it, whatever the basis is. It shows us a little bit what the problem is. And we have our own data by now, right? Which is great. And I like the way you visualized it. I really liked it. Good story. So, but we're moving on. I'm working, and that's funny enough, I'm getting my money from EU projects, and we really try to, put the taxpayers' money to good use there, and we're working hard on that. So the project is called Vision Cloud, and originally it was a project about cloud storage, and it still is, but there's a media use case in there, and we're using our freedom to come up with something that is potentially really helpful. And what we did here is that we looked at all the phases of data journalism. What we tried to build is a workflow for better data journalism. And that's kind of addressing what we heard from Romania, that there must be more structure, more stuff sorting it, and more metadata. And it's tough problems, but how could it look like? So we work on it. So if we look at the different phases of how data gets valuable, they might be different in space and what is needed. And at the same time, there are a lot of tools, as you know, out there that could help us, like Google Refine and whatever the Google tools are, Data Wrangler, Scraper Wiki, all this stuff, but it's not integrated into the newsroom. And from our point of view at Deutsche Welle, it doesn't make any sense to rebuild that. Instead, we would like to have this workflow into a smarter interaction. So on the higher level, you see this is just like a well-organized file server with versioning control on all the data sets, so that you keep the raw data, that you see it filtered, that the guys working on the visualization take the refined one, making it more easy, bringing down the barriers, that's it. And then we're moving out to the best tool that is out there, and that's it. We don't have to reinvent the wheel here, okay? So I'm really happy to discuss all that, and even being criticized and doing it wrong, I can only learn from that. That's not the point. It's not about me knowing better. We're just very engaged trying to, move it, okay? So I'm nearing my end. So I kind of trained myself to present fast. Sometimes too fast, but still, people don't mind somebody talking short. Too long is usually a problem, right? So there's more in this. I think if we do it right, and here at OKCon, that's why I asked Jonathan, can I speak at OKCon? Please, can I speak at OKCon? I mean, at the end, it kind of turned out quite well. But first reaction was, no, you're too late. So, but, being persistent, I think there's a chance for a new word I would like to coin, a pattern change. A movement of power from politicians and higher ranking institutions. And we've seen people from the EU today. They are people, like us. We are all basically the same. We're individuals in need of more insight, some help to manage our lives. And there's a lot of what driving our life in data. And we all could, put something to it. And I would like to ask the question for the hacking session, what would be the tools that the next generation thinks of as obvious? Like, how could you ever live without that? Like a calculator to do my perspective on house financing, not the bank's perspective on house financing. A tool that is clearly on my side, that not collecting my private data, that is on my side, my personal agent, my personal business intelligence. Why not? I think it's a huge market, and even if I have a good, trustable service for you, and I ask you, I say, listen, we're journalists, we have to live with that, we need like 5 years, and you can keep that calculator forever. I think we're getting there, but these models haven't been tried out, and that's what we're fighting for right now. And we got to have proof of concept, which is the next. But I think what we saw is there can be so many things done, you were programming that tool up there, which, as I said, I was amazed how much recognition it got, and I think we need more of that. But these are like the investigative stuff, which is absolutely needed here, and I think it's important to do investigations. There's one tragedy about investigations. In today's world, if you tell people that others kind of betray and take money away, they kind of say, after you doing 2 years of investigation, I knew it. I knew it before. And so I think investigations are needed and part of the journalistic offering and what we do and what we have to do, uncovering it. But we need to go deeper, because otherwise it's no surprise. And then we invest like 2 years of work and get nowhere. Nobody notices. So I think clarity is the next step. And I was really supportive of this project of Catherine Malbrandon. She was doing it on the side too. She financed her project about income in the US on Kickstarter, and she expected $6,000, and in the end she got $14,000. And I even wrote an article for Nicholas, for Oni for that, because I thought it's important. If it's trustable, people give you the money to do that. It's not something sustainable that we can do all the time. But people are interested in the development of income. And I would like to see the development of disposable income in Germany over the last 50 years. Why is it that my dad was a single worker and my mom, was looking after the house? In my family, we're both working, and still, it's not easy. I'm not like getting filthy rich here, And I would just like to, lead a stable life. That's all I'm asking for. And why not? I mean, that's probably my right? And so I think, from surprise to clarity to trust, there's quite a long way to go for data journalism. And together with Nicholas, I wrote an article based on a tweet where we were kind of discussing with Geoff McGee, like, what is the next step for data-driven journalism? And we were kind of getting, uneasy. And then we said, media companies must become trusted data hubs. And it's very interesting that Simon says that we're going to be, as a medium, we're going to be data curators. Data curators with a different mindset than everybody else, like not the Facebook mindset, not the Google mindset. I'm not criticizing it here, they have their roles, but journalism should take another active role in looking at data from a people's perspective, and that's our big chance. And we would be the natural owners as journalists. Everybody would say, journalists, I'm not sure whether they always write the same thing, but they would lose everything if they would misuse my data, which is a good measure. So a lot of examples, and this is the one. It's hope, okay? It's hope. I don't know how this is. And I'm not claiming that I know everything. I'm just working very intensely. I'm trying to build the network and support and whatever I can do in here. It's very dear to my heart, that I can say. And I think that from the past, where we looked at data just because getting something, it now moved into the very center of what journalism is doing, and we need like a lot of really capable developers with that on the same desk, not in the other room, not somewhere to repair the printers or set up a server in half a year. In the newsroom, we need a certain skill set where we can make stuff happen very fast in an agile way. So, and I like this example. It's stolen from Visually, which is supposed to be an upcoming platform for new forms of looking at data. And that's kind of, my vision for it. I'm through like in a minute, okay? So you're walking around, you have your glowing rectangle with you, and you're interested in that thing, whatever it is, and you're getting an answer. And I like this example that's leading into the future. And that would be a database not trying to sell me something, but telling me whether this car has frequent breakdowns, what the resale price is, and whether I should get another car, and how many cars of that color are in my region available from trusted sellers. Something like that. Why not? Problem here, and that's almost the last one, there's no standard career path to becoming a deconstructor of wrongness. It's a little bit complicated quote, but I think working against everybody else and having so many doubts around us is like costing a lot of energy, and we need to kind of clarify our role and what it's leading to. And I'm really indebted both to the open data movement and a lot of journalists that I'm trying to find out why they're doing a job as they do. And I feel like being part of a community here, not like it's me doing that or whatever. A little bit strange thing, but probably, we're from a public broadcaster, and that's a mindset that we can have. We're privileged to have that. So here's a good thing to say about this kind of models. So I'm really absolutely willing to discuss, add something, or argue. I'm using the Twitter hashtag DDJ, which is, from my point of knowledge, the shortest and most stable way of a small group of people across the world arguing and discussing what's going on in data-driven journalism. The Guardian is using DDJ too, right? On occasion. Yeah. But basically it's the accepted hashtag, right?
Yes.
Okay, because it's short, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So, thank you very much. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much, Mirko. I'm going to abuse chair generous privilege to ask you the first
We need
question.
2 minutes.
Okay, I'm just wondering, the last slide seemed to really speak to this idea of usefulness, and one of the things that academics like to think about a lot is in which ways do citizens engage with democracy and politics. And I think a lot of the literature is kind of riddled with participation in politics is about voting, and it's about kind of very big politics. And I think what you're getting at, and I think what I sort of see a lot of green shoots for, is that there's other ways in which people and citizens can engage in politics, and it's around usefulness, and that's often to do with their lives. So it's when does my trash get collected, right? The example of open data in Vancouver. Where is my local allotment and how much does it cost? What are the bus times? This is an example from Data GM in Manchester. So I was just wondering if you can comment on the potential of kind of useful, mundane data in terms of citizens kind of really actively getting more engaged with all of what the previous panel and what you discussed, how that can work.
I think that's important as a high-level investigation, because what we're seeing now is that the local transport data is getting standardized so that we have a chance of writing an app for that. Open data in the City of London is open, so we can look at traffics, and there are some new apps coming out helping people to navigate the city. But that's the point here. I think it's not criticizing academia, but the briefing for academia.
Feel free.
Yeah, no, the briefing for academia, for example, the high-ranking statistics people, okay, is, okay, we need stats for the whole of Europe, we need stats for London, and stats for the UK or Germany, and it has to be like this. So there is like a bracket around it, and these guys know, I mean, these are really good statisticians, they know that it could be done better. But that perspective is missing something. I would argue that the support that we're getting from politics at the moment is a kind of sign that even these high-ranking people are kind of overwhelmed by the decisions they have to make. And even they could use like data, given like a long-term calculation on an ongoing basis on the risk of defaulting of Greece or another country. Why not? Like data-driven politics, and that, from what I know, some of the ideas about government 2.0. Which is like, on O'Reilly Media, or all over the place. But that's, the problem here is that's a bit of too much. And here I kind of, only segmented that what can journalists add to that, and made a point about why journalism could benefit from that and what the general role is.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions from the audience for Mirko?
Can I ask you if you can
Can you
put back...
speak? Can you speak up?
Yes, if you can put back the slide where you showed the community of other people searching for new models of journalism, to take some notes.
Which one was that?
One of the last ones.
Okay.
This one. No. Just the first group.
The face.
The first before the last. Next one.
This one.
Yes.
That one.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are all journalists that I'm noticing that are really working hard on that. They all have a role in that. They find new formats. They are innovative.
Yes.
And actually, from what I know, quite a few of them are well paid too, which is great.
One of them?
Quite a few of them are well paid too. There are at least 2 millionaires on this chart, which I think is okay. You do the guessing.
Yeah,
Yeah, but one has, Rafat Ali has, started paid content out of being unemployed, right, around 2000.
yeah.
That's what I know. And did a good thing with paid content, and it's now owned by, it's still with the Guardian?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is, yeah.
And I
So it
think,
doesn't filter down to journalists, unfortunately. I mean, we could all earn more money than Daily Mail or something.
Okay.
I-
So this data about
just to
salaries
add-
is available also?
yeah.
Okay.
Just one thing that I would like to add. Brian Stone says, as a journalist, you don't get rich, but you're leading a rich life, which I liked, and then quoted in a seminar with journalists from South America and said, we don't want that. Why is that? Well, in the last newsroom where I worked, the journalists were selling nuts to each other to make some extra money. Oh, I'm not talking about stuff like that. So it's always a question of perspective of what is being rich.
Okay, there's a question here.
Yes. Hello, I'm Petri from Helsinki, and I work on the local government level on the Helsinki region InfoShare product, where we are opening data sets, but we are also actively thinking about the use of data. And from our perspective, we would hope that journalists would help the city to make more informed decisions. And we have been thinking about what could we do besides opening data sets? How could we help you in making that come true? So I would be really happy if you could think about that aloud a bit.
I think the big problem right now, and we saw it a bit from the data from the survey, especially the local newspapers are kind of lagging behind. I think they're on their way to building a platform where they can provide exclusive news on a local level, which is then probably a new source of, attention, trust, and potential income. But they're not there yet. You're a little bit too early. Like, it's good that the data is open, but they haven't found their model. I think there's not that much to do about it. It's just arguing and showing examples, training people. I have no clue for that at the moment. But I think you're on the right way. It's the others that are kind of lagging behind.
Okay, there's a question there in the middle. Okay, yeah. Can you speak up?
I just have one quick question. Is it something that we've been talking about at this conference, which is, what's your advice on pitching a data-driven journalistic feature or story to a conventional newsroom? Like, how do you convince your editor to let you do a story that may take months of work before you actually know what the story is?
What I feel is the doors are opening. At the same time, we're kind of doing this stuff kind of hidden. We're preparing them and making them very convincing. We're not asking whether they would be interested in a data project. I would approach them when I have like a scoop. And that just by chance it would be, supported by data. But I would say that what they're interested in, and that's rightly so, because why should they foresee what is in the data? And I have a long story. I said, I can get us 1 million views next week. I have a good story. This is the story. Can you support it by facts? Yes, I can. And then I would have like a database. That would be how I would do it.
Okay, there's a question.
I would just add to that, because I spent a lot of time trying to pitch data storage to the desk. But actually, sometimes it's just, if you go to the desk and say, I've got 30,000 records from Afghanistan war, or 9,000 web records, and they're going to be interested, and they're going to know this story there. But often the kind of things that you're having to pitch are more esoteric than that. You need to go over the story of more kind of news line and think of it journalistically. So, I know we had these health profiles out this week, and you could go to the desk and say, well, this is really good story. We know where Britain has the worst teeth or whatever, and then you get stories. It's just like it's
you have to you do have to do the digging first.
Yeah,
really.
absolutely.
I mean, you can't just
And when you get established, I guess they're going to take more stuff on faith, and they might even give you data sets that don't have to handle. What we find now is that a lot of our work, maybe that third bit comes from other reports coming over with stuff they want help with, so they already know where to start with it.
And I can add one data point to that. I've been talking, moving in this data journalism scene. I asked people from the New York Times who are now stacking up. They have 20, and I tend to misquote the New York Times, and I'm always getting corrected on Twitter for that. About 20 people by now that are working on multimedia packages. And what I hear and see from what Amanda Cox says, the big data stories get as much traffic as a big scoop.
Yeah.
And with the Texas Tribune, which is publishing local data, they say, again, don't name me on the facts, I always make difficult. About 30% of the traffic is now
I heard they got like 50% of the traffic from
and it went up.
We get about 1 million page impressions a month on base stuff, which seems weird for someone doing it. We don't really believe that. We thought it would just be a tiny group of people would be interested.
Okay, we have time for one last question before we wrap up this session, please, Tim.
Yeah, from my perspective, one of the most fascinating and innovative way of dealing with the data that these guys are doing today, it's the visualization step. But it's also one of the most difficult steps to take when you're just a simple blogger or a journalist. Because you can write a poor article and nobody will read it, but if you build a poor visualization, it's just ugly and it's useless. So where do you start gaining competence in visualization, and what are the other ways to deal with data without making visualization?
I think if it's a good headline supported by data, it's as good as a visualization. And what I'm referencing on, there's a book by Nick Davis, Flat Earth News, and he investigated why journalism, in that case in the UK, kind of went down in quality, whether it was in Murdoch or investors. And what he found is that the rhythm of journalistic work has changed. Like what he's calling journalism, just churning out stories with, filling up a page and having 300 posts on a bigger page to gain in traffic. That's kind of done with, how to say, like the journalists themselves. Like right now, the problem is that we don't take the time to actually, stick on a topic over probably 6 months, see the patterns of the data, become really familiar with them. And I think when you reach that level of competency, then it's less of a problem whether you write a good story, have the right headline, launch an investigation, tell something to people that they didn't know. And that's the point here. I think, how good is the quality of the information? Just the infographic won't help that information. That's what we're seeing increasingly. We're kind of getting tired of, another infographic by now, however beautifully it's done. If it doesn't say something to us, that's a problem. So it's like taking pictures with a camera. There are some pictures that stick in your mind forever, and most of them, are just pictures, which is okay, which is, we can do them. But it's data journalism at the end of the day, creating the picture that sticks with you.
Okay, on the high note of the pictures that stick with you, I'm going to call this session to a close. Anyone interested in the now impromptu third part of Mirko's performance?
No, that's different. It's Georgie. Georgie is the main man. I'm just the journalist. I'm not the sidekick.
But can I clarify then? The third session in here will be about applicability. What can be done?
Yes, we would like to open the floor.
Great.
Because we thought just talking and discussing is not the whole thing.
Yep.
That's why we did it, and we have like another 2 charts asking questions, and then the floor is absolutely open.